Hey, I love you, Kate. Y'all please give it up for Kate Gwimbalow as she
Thank
makes
you.
her way back to the stage again to give us
Thank
an amazing
you.
message.
I want to take just a second and recognize, I don't know if you understand the back mechanics of what happens on stage with this team, but I didn't choose this topic until Wednesday of this week. And if you think back about the songs that they just sang, when we get to the end of this lesson, I want you to think back about what they sang. They actually every week set the stage for what you're going to be open to hear. I see you, Lee Langston. I see you. Because I do choose. Today's talk is based on a book that I read several years ago and had really a profound impact on my life. It's David Richo's book. It's called The 5 Things We Cannot Change and the Happiness We Find by Embracing Them. So in it, Richo, he outlines these 5 unavoidable truths of life, that they're not problems to be solved, but realities to be accepted. And that allows us then, when we do accept them, to live with greater grace, more joy, more presence. Take a deep breath, because they're hard to read. You ready? 1, everything changes and ends. 2, things do not always go according to plan. 3, life is not always fair. 4, pain is a part of life. And 5, this one gives me the ick, people are not loving and loyal all of the time. I know, right? Ugh. So when I read that list, I remember nodding along with them as I opened the book. Yes, things do change. I know that. Sure. Yeah, plans unravel. People let us down. Pain is a part of life. But the one that stopped me in my tracks, the one that kind of caught in my throat like a stone, was the one in the middle, number 3. Life is not always fair. It stopped me because as I sat with it, I realized that for me, it is the gateway. It's the gateway. It holds the most charge because it's the one that my childhood, my trauma, my entire forgiveness journey that I've taken have all danced around that for decades, that life is not fair. Because it feels true to me that until we reckon with unfairness and understand it, the other 4 truths, well, they all feel like betrayal. Change feels like cruelty. Pain feels personal. Disappointment, it feels like punishment. But once we stop needing life to be fair, once we understand that, we stop needing for the past to be different. We choose to focus on what we want to be. Well, that's where true spiritual freedom begins. And that's what I want to talk about. It's moving from life is not fair to freedom, because within that is the truth of freedom. So I want to begin not at the beginning, but right smack dab in the middle, with the one that I wrestled with the longest, the one that taught me how to release my story, to reframe the pain, that's important, and to remember the truth of who I am, which is not what happened to me. Look, it's not fair that some of us are born into chaos instead of calm. It's not fair that some of us carry grief and pain and abuse and betrayal when others seem to float through life. But there's a deeper truth, and what took me a lot of years and a lot of pain to understand, that we didn't come here to be treated fairly. That wasn't the soul's assignment. We came here to awaken, and sometimes unfairness is part of that curriculum. So I want to be clear, though, that it doesn't mean that we asked to be abused. It doesn't mean that we deserved what happened to us, and it absolutely does not mean that we should minimize or bypass the real harm that can be done. This is not spiritual gaslighting. This is not everything happens for a reason. That's not what this is, tied up in a bow. This is about reclaiming authorship of your story without blaming yourself for the things that others have chosen to do. In New Thought, we understand that our soul came into this lifetime for growth, for expansion, and remembrance. And while we don't consciously invite trauma, there is a deeper spiritual self that these experience, when processed and healed and transmuted, they become the very soil in which we grow our power. So it doesn't mean that the wound is holy, but it means that the healing can be. Now, that unfairness was real. The harm was wrong. But the soul is infinitely creative, and it can take what was never fair and turn it into fierce compassion, into hard-won wisdom and radical freedom. The unfairness in my life is why I'm such a great activist, is why I'm such an amazing mother. When I say that unfairness is the curriculum, I don't mean that I deserved or we deserve to suffer. I mean that, like any great teacher, life sometimes shows up with lessons that stretch us and shake us, and ultimately they return us to a deeper knowing. And that is why we're going to begin here. Not because life is fair, but because we can be free anyway. New Thought teaches us that nothing in our lives is random, right? That everything, even the things we wish had never happened, are part of the soul's unfolding. So I want to talk about what we do when it isn't fair. How we stop waiting for justice and start choosing freedom. And how we can return again and again to the truth of our wholeness. And before I go into that, I want to share a heartfelt caveat here. One that really weighed heavily on me this week as I chose this topic. God, I could have chosen any of them. And I picked this one. But I began to really suffer as I thought about the deep systemic injustices that are happening around the world. Right? The kind of suffering that goes far beyond personal hardship. That can be cruel and relentless and inhumane. We see it every time we turn the TV on. And that part grieves me, and it feels unreal because unfair seems too small a word for the atrocities that the world is enduring. How do we start talking about healing when the wounds of entire communities, entire nations are still wide open? And so I was wrestling with that question, and I stopped by to see Reverend Mike and Mark Hayes on Thursday. And I said, I'm having trouble with this. I'm a little overwhelmed by it to stand up there and talk about changing here when there's so much in the world. And Mark Hayes gently reminded me, he said something so simple and powerful. He said, yes, Kate, we need to think globally, but we need to act locally. So in other words, healing the world starts with healing our own hearts, our own homes, our own communities, one relationship, one act of courage, one prayer at a time. And that's what we're going to do today. So it starts with me, with the places in my own life where I long for fairness, for peace, and for healing. And I trust that as we each begin here, something bigger will begin to unfold, something holy, something hopeful. I want to go back in time. So I went to high school in Alexandria, Virginia. I had just moved from Germany. I'd spent my entire childhood and had no remembrance of the U.S. I was wide-eyed. Culture shock doesn't begin to explain it. Teenager, awkward, right? Big glasses, 80s. And that's when I met Chris Sammons. Chris was this tall, charming, blonde, well-liked football player, completely relentless in tormenting me. I was his target, his prey. His bullying wasn't physical, but man, it was piercing. His cruelty wasn't loud, but it was unshakable. I could not get away from him. And his voice followed me for decades. Not just in memory, but in identity. Do you see what I'm saying? So beyond the time that I last saw him in person, he stayed with me. I built a temple to my resentment of him. I had every reason to, because I was suffering, not because Chris was still hurting me, but because I was rehearsing that injury every day. Almost 2 decades later, I discovered radical forgiveness. Some of you have taken my workshop. A dear friend and mentor, Florence Henderson from the Brady Bunch, she handed me a copy of that book by Colin Tipping, and the axis of my life shifted. I know most of you know Florence as Carol Brady from TV, but spiritually, she was so much more than a TV mom. Flo was deeply grounded. She was wildly wise and a truly generous soul. She practiced a form of what I called practical mysticism because she brought grace and humor and this unshakable faith into every room. She was one of those people that she could laugh with you, but also walk straight into your soul's truth in the same breath and knock you back on your heels. So she'd done her own healing, and when she met me, she recognized that I was in a period of trauma and growth and rebuilding, and she gave me that book. No accident, we were meant to meet, and she has changed the course of my life. Reading Radical Forgiveness wasn't just a light bulb moment, it was a full body awakening. because suddenly I had a language for the things I had felt but never articulated, the desire that I had to unshackle myself from everything that had happened in my past. I'd seen myself imprisoned by carrying the pain that wasn't mine to hold on to. And I saw how forgiveness wasn't about excusing what happened, it was about reclaiming who I was before it happened. It was what would lead to the elimination of victimhood in my life. No victimhood ever. That is power, my friends. Forgiveness is not about saying it's okay, it's about saying I'm okay. It's not excusing what happened, it's not letting someone else off the hook, it's removing that hook from your own heart. It is spiritual technology. It alchemizes pain into power. It's not a moral obligation. It's not about being nice. It's not about liberation. It's about saying, I choose not to suffer anymore in the name of something that has already ended. See, Chris didn't stop hurting me when he graduated. I stopped hurting when I decided I was done carrying him around with me. In New Thought, we know that our thinking creates our reality. Not just vision boards and mantras, but we know that it is in every moment of our experience. And that's why forgiveness changed everything for me. It didn't erase what happened. It reframed what it meant. Forgiveness teaches us that our souls invite every experience into our evolution. That on a spiritual level, those who hurt us are not enemies. They are sacred contracts. Poof, big girl stuff. I want to say again, even the ones who hurt us deeply may be showing up in service to us. All right, so what does that look like? Does it mean that we have to like it? No. Does it mean we keep them in our lives? Oh, absolutely not. But it means that we are willing to entertain the possibility. I start my workshop with that. Can you just entertain the possibility that something larger is unfolding? That we are not powerless victims in a chaotic world, but divine beings learning through contrast, refining through experience, and healing through choice. And the absolutely magical thing about being able to acknowledge this is that once you realize that, you never meet another person who harms you in that way. And it isn't because when we know better, we do better. No, you literally repel them from your existence. They no longer enter your realm. You see, I've lived two lives. One is the Instagram moments, full of adventure, love, laughter, a whole lot of stories. I was the kid who grew up walking through castles in Germany, strolling down the streets of Paris with a baguette in my hand. As a teenager in D.C., I sat in on Senate hearings. I listened to arguments in the Supreme Court. I marched for causes that were bigger than myself. And I've built a career that I love. I've been an executive for 30 years. I've traveled the world so many times I can't count. I've grown companies, I've led teams, I've mentored people. I've stood on stage in front of 6,000 people and spoken. I've built a family full of laughter and love. I've raised a son that I deeply admire. I've toasted in Tuscany. I've eaten mule in China. Yes, mule. That's a whole different sermon. And I've swum in hidden cenotes in Mexico. That is my life, and every word of it is true. But there's another life that I've lived as well, lest you think it was all wine and sunshine. See, I was the girl who didn't feel safe in her own home. I was the one who flinched at the sound of my little brother being beaten with a belt, who cried herself to sleep in her pillow every night and then woke up the next morning to pretend like everything was okay. I was the one who at 13 was sexually assaulted, and I didn't tell anyone because silence felt safer than shame. And at 16, I was the one who was left at home with my little brother to take care of and hide the fact that our mother had run away from home, terrified that we'd end up in foster care. I tried to be perfect through all that. I thought if I could just smile enough, achieve enough, shrink enough, maybe no one would see how much I was hurting. I learned to wear my pain like armor. I became excellent, polished, straight A, strong. People said I was impressive, but most days I was just trying to make it. So that is also my life. It's just as real. And for a long time, I thought I had to pick one or the other, that one canceled out the other, that I had to choose between that highlight reel and the heavy. But I don't, because the truth is I'm both. And the moment that I stopped hiding one story behind the other, thanks to Florence, with radical forgiveness, the moment I stopped pretending that if I was joyful, it meant I'd never known pain, well, that's when I got free. Not because life got any more fair, but because everything got healed. And because I stopped asking which version of me was real, and I started realizing that they both are, and that I am not what happened to me. I am who I am because they happened to me. Because life isn't always fair, but embracing and healing those unfair experiences is where my freedom lived. Not in pretending that I was never broken, but in realizing that I was never unworthy. So the more I practiced forgiveness, the more I started seeing every wound as a teacher, every scar as sacred. And that's when I stopped asking, why did this happen to me? And I started asking, what did this come to teach me? And since then, I do not have those moments because I cut them off at the knees like that. Look, one of the principal core knowings in New Thought is that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, right? I would challenge us that we are not a body for the spirit. We are a spirit with a body, okay? It's a little different. Soul doesn't live in here. I am living in my soul. Okay. We are not broken. We are becoming. We came in perfect. We leave perfect. What we choose to do in the middle is all up to us. It isn't whether or not life will hurt. It's whether we will rise. New Thought teaches us that our soul chooses the curriculum of our life, not the trauma, the opportunity. So radical forgiveness isn't about healing the pain. It's about seeing the higher place. Here's the beauty. Once you do this work and you stop attracting those old patterns, you stop living under the laws of your pain. You start creating from your power. Now, this work is not always pretty. It is soul-scraping. It is truth-telling work. But it is the most sacred work we can do when things are not fair. Because every time we forgive, we dissolve a barrier between us and our source. We release the weight that we were never meant to carry. And something incredible happens. We start to live unarmored. We become more available for joy, for connection, for divine flow. Forgiveness is a return to our natural state. And our natural state is peace. We know this. So let me ask you, what are you still carrying that wasn't fair? What injustice, what betrayal? What moment from your past still has its hooks in your heart? Because I'm here to tell you you're right, it wasn't fair. It never should have happened. But it did. And now the question is, will you stay there? Or will you choose to be free? Because you don't need permission to let it go. You don't need validation to heal. Forgiveness doesn't rewrite the past. It rewrites the future. So I want to share a couple of ideas with you today. How do you even start? I'm going to give you 5. One is write a forgiveness letter. Not to send, but to release. Write it to the person without condoning what happened. Clear your energy, put it on paper, give yourself full permission to say what you might never even say out loud. You're not going to send it. You're going to vomit it onto the page. All of it. Mean. Use all the F words. There's more than one. Be raw, be honest, be unfiltered. And then I want you to take that and I want you to either burn it or bury it or tear it up and let it go down the stream. I release you from my story, you say in that. I am setting myself free from you. You no longer have a hold on me. Because the moment that you put that pain on paper, you stop carrying it in your body. And then the moment that you release it, you create space for light, for joy, for you. 2, please read Radical Forgiveness. It's like $17.99 on Amazon. And learn how to use the worksheet. It's what I did for a year, every night for a year. I did radical forgiveness worksheets. You'll find them online. They don't make a lot of sense unless you've read the book. So start reading the book and explore how those things showed up in life and what you can learn from them. Because then you end up winning. I actually thank those people. I thank the man who sexually abused me. I don't want it for anybody else. And if I could go back to that 13-year-old, I'd save her from it. But by God, he served me. Do you know how many people I've advocated for, how many people I've helped, that I've stopped that from happening for them? Same with my family. That dysfunction, that chaos. It is why I live in peace. It is why in our home we don't raise our voice. We don't use our hands against each other. So I want you to do a worksheet, one for each wound. Sometimes you have to do them more than once. I had people I had to do continuously. Don't rush it. Honor each story. 3, create a freedom ritual. Similar to the letter. But in this case, find a sacred space. Light a candle. And instead of writing it down, speak it aloud. If you're a verbal person as opposed to a written person, find that quiet space. Maybe gather objects that are healing for you, a stone, a feather, something from nature, a picture, music. And as you light that candle, invite spirit into that moment in communion with you. And if you want, you can write just a few words of what it is you're releasing, and you can burn it in that candle, or again, bury it, but release it. Do that. Let it be sacred. Let it be yours. Let it start that next chapter for you. 4, this one's uncomfortable as hell. Practice mirror work. Who's done mirror work? Whew, weird, right? But so good. This is where you stand in front of a mirror and you look yourself in the eye, not a passing glance. You do that soul level stare. You breathe into it and gently you say, you did not deserve what happened to you, but you deserve to be free. Talk to yourself the way that you would to a child or to someone that you love. And if the tears come, let them come. And if resistance rises, notice it, accept it, and be okay with it. This can feel so awkward and can be very emotional. Have you ever looked deeply into your own eyes? Hard to escape that one. With time, it becomes a really powerful act of reparenting yourself and of soul remembrance. So you're not trying to convince yourself of a lie, you're reminding yourself of the truth. Do it daily if you can. Let your eyes be the mirror to the truth within. And last, share your story. This is a big part of radical forgiveness. It's one of the steps. Find a therapist or a trusted friend or your journal. Bring your truth into the light, and that's where the healing will begin. But I want to be really clear. This is not about victimhood story time. This is not about rehearsing your pain endlessly over and over and reliving it through repetition. You get to tell that story once in full detail, fully, vulnerably, honestly, with someone who has the capacity to hold your truth with love and is committed to helping you move forward. Because let me tell you, you do not want to choose someone who loves victimhood and is happy to pull a rocking chair up next to you and sit there for the rest of the day going, yep, let me tell you then what happened to me. No. No, 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 no. You tell that story once in a sacred space and you move it out of your body. You know, I love when Reverend Chris Michaels was here. He once said to me, you know, someone would come to him with this terrible, tragic victimhood and he would listen fully and say, oh gosh, I'm so sorry that happened to you. And then the next time he saw them and they'd say, well, you know, such and such, and he would stop them and say, absolutely, I remember you told me that. So what are you doing about it? I started doing that. It was great, especially at work. You know, we do those stones the first day of every year. You write what you're going to do. Yeah, and I have a saying each year. And for one whole year after that, it was the difference this year for me is going to be the difference between what are you going to do about it and what are you going to do about it? So share your story with someone who will ask you, what are you going to do about it? Like, you don't need to heal overnight. You can begin healing today. Beginning is enough. Let it be imperfect. Let it be sacred. But let it begin. So I want to leave you with this. Listen to me. You are not what has happened to you. You are not the unfairness that you have endured. You are not here to earn your freedom. You are here to remember it, to reclaim it, to rise inside of it. And beautiful souls, you are not here to suffer for your story. You are meant to shine through it. You are the light. You are the wisdom. You are the divine spark in human form. Let that be your truth. Let that be your compass. Let that be your healing. Not because life is fair, but because you are done being bound what previously broke you. Because you are the one who gets to decide to forgive, to release, to rise, to walk forward radiant and whole and free. You are the living embodiment of grace in motion, that divine unfolding of love, wisdom, and infinite power. So let the story soften. Let the pain unhook. Let your soul rise up with holy defiance. Holy defiance. You are the one who gets to decide right now to forgive, to transform, to walk forward in radiant truth. Because life may not be fair, but dear ones, you are free. And so ends the lesson. Thank you. Thank you so much.